It all started innocently enough. Jessica, a 22-year-old college student, was walking home from a friend's house late one night. She took her usual shortcut through the park when she noticed something in the distance, a figure standing perfectly still under a flickering streetlight. As she got closer, Jessica's heart began to race. It was a clown, dressed in full costume with a painted smile that didn't reach its cold, lifeless eyes. The clown didn't move, didn't say a word, just stared at her as she walked by. Trying to shake off the encounter, Jessica quickened her pace. But as she exited the park, she turned back to look, and the clown was gone. Relieved, she continued on her way. But her relief was short-lived. She soon realized that the clown was following her, always staying just out of reach, lurking in the shadows. For weeks, the stalking continued. Jessica saw the clown everywhere, outside her apartment building, at the coffee shop where she worked, even at the grocery store. No matter where she went, the clown was there, always watching, never speaking. She went to the police, but without any direct threat, they couldn't do much. Then one night, Jessica woke up to a noise outside her window. She looked out, and there on the fire escape was the clown, staring at her through the glass. Terrified, Jessica moved out of her apartment and left the city, hoping to escape the clown that had haunted her. But no matter where she went, the clown always seemed to find her. The final straw came when she moved to a small town in the middle of nowhere, hoping to disappear. But one night, she received a text message from an unknown number. "Found you." Panicked, Jessica locked herself in her bedroom, but the clown was already inside the house. The last thing she heard was the squeak of his oversized shoes as he crept closer. Jessica's body was never found, but her apartment was discovered in disarray, with a single balloon left behind, floating in the middle of the room. David was an avid camper, always seeking out remote, off-the-beaten-path spots to pitch his tent and enjoy the solitude of nature. One weekend, he decided to explore a new area deep in the woods, far from any civilization. He found the perfect spot, a small clearing surrounded by dense forest. As night fell, David set up his campfire and settled in for a peaceful evening. But just as he was about to drift off to sleep, he heard it. The faint sound of laughter echoing through the trees. It was strange. David was miles from the nearest town, and the laughter didn't sound like it belonged to a group of campers. It was high-pitched, almost maniacal, and it sent a chill down his spine. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped out of his tent, shining the light into the darkness. The laughter stopped. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, as he turned to head back to his tent, he saw it. A clown, half hidden behind a tree, its face illuminated by the beam of the flashlight. The clown's makeup was smeared, its clothes dirty and torn. It didn't move, just stared at David with a twisted grin. Heart pounding, David slowly backed away, keeping his eyes on the clown. But the clown didn't stay hidden for long. As David tried to pack up his camp, the clown emerged from the shadows, its grin growing wider. Panic set in, and David ran, leaving his gear behind. He didn't stop running until he reached his car, several miles away. When he finally looked back, the clown was nowhere to be seen. David never returned to that campsite, but the experience left him haunted. Every night since, he's been plagued by the same dream, running through the woods, hearing that same maniacal laughter. One night, David didn't wake up from the dream. The authorities found his body deep in the woods, far from any campsite, his face frozen in terror. The only clue was a torn piece of a clown's costume found near his body. It was supposed to be a happy occasion, Timmy's 6th birthday party. His parents had hired a clown to entertain the children, complete with balloon animals, face painting, and magic tricks. The kids were thrilled when the clown, known as Bobo, arrived in his brightly colored costume and oversized shoes. Bobo seemed to be the perfect entertainer. He had the kids laughing and cheering in no time. But as the party went on, Timmy's parents began to notice something strange. Bobo's humor was becoming darker, his jokes taking on a sinister edge. When it came time for the magic tricks, Bobo pulled out a deck of cards. "Pick a card, any card," he said to Timmy. The boy hesitated, but eventually chose one. Bobo took the card and held it up for everyone to see. It was the ace of spades. Bobo's smile faded as he stared at the card. "This is the card of death," he whispered, his voice low and menacing. The room fell silent, the cheerful atmosphere turning cold. Before anyone could react, Bobo grabbed Timmy by the arm, his grip tight. "Do you want to see a real trick?" he asked, his voice dripping with malice. Timmy's parents rushed forward, pulling their son away from the clown. Bobo's face twisted in anger, but he didn't resist. He simply turned and walked out of the house, leaving the party in stunned silence. The police were called, but Bobo had vanished. The agency that had sent him denied knowing anything about a clown by that name, and no one ever saw him again. Timmy was left traumatized, and for years, he would wake up screaming from nightmares about the clown with the deck of cards. Years later, as an adult, Timmy received a package in the mail with no return address. Inside was an old deck of cards with the ace of spades on top. As he turned the card over, he found a single word written in blood-red ink: "Now." Timmy was found dead in his apartment the next day, his face contorted in a look of pure terror, the deck of cards scattered around him. The police found no evidence of a struggle, but on the wall, written in what appeared to be blood, were the words, "The final trick." Carnivals are supposed to be fun, a place where people of all ages can enjoy rides, games, and entertainment. But for Sarah, a visit to the local carnival turned into a night of terror she would never forget. Sarah and her friends decided to visit the carnival one evening, eager to experience the rides and attractions. As they wandered through the brightly lit stalls, Sarah noticed a clown standing near the entrance to the funhouse. Unlike the other performers, this clown wasn't engaging with the crowd. It just stood there, staring at her. Something about the clown made Sarah uneasy, but she brushed it off, thinking it was just part of the act. She and her friends entered the funhouse, laughing as they navigated the maze of mirrors and obstacles. But as they made their way through the twisting corridors, Sarah felt a growing sense of dread. She kept seeing the clown's reflection in the mirrors, always just behind her, always watching. Her friends didn't seem to notice anything strange, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. When they finally exited the funhouse, Sarah looked back, and there it was, the clown, standing just inside the entrance, its eyes locked on hers. The rest of the night, the clown seemed to be everywhere. No matter where they went in the carnival, Sarah would spot it in the crowd, its painted smile growing more sinister with each passing hour. Eventually, Sarah couldn't take it anymore. She insisted they leave, but as they made their way to the exit, the clown stepped in front of her, blocking her path. It leaned in close, its breath hot on her face, and whispered, "See you in your dreams." Terrified, Sarah and her friends ran out of the carnival, not stopping until they were safely home. But that night, Sarah had the most vivid nightmare of her life. The clown dragging her back to the carnival, where no one could hear her scream. The nightmares continued, each one more terrifying than the last. No matter what she did, Sarah couldn't escape the clown. She sought help from doctors, therapists, and even spiritual healers, but nothing worked. One night, after months of sleeplessness and torment, Sarah's neighbors heard screams coming from her apartment. By the time they broke down the door, it was too late. Sarah was lying in bed, her eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling in terror. The only clue was a single balloon tied to her wrist, floating gently in the still air. When Emma and her family moved into their new home, they were excited to start fresh. The house, old and full of character, seemed like the perfect place to raise their two children. But there was something about the house that unnerved Emma, the basement. It was dark, damp, and always cold, no matter the weather. Emma avoided it as much as possible. One day, while cleaning out old boxes, she discovered something strange hidden in the basement's shadows. A clown doll, dusty and faded, with cracked paint and worn fabric. Its glassy eyes seemed to follow her as she moved. Emma felt a chill creep down her spine but brushed it off, assuming the doll was just an old relic left by the previous owners. She threw it in the trash without a second thought. That night, Emma woke to a strange sound, soft giggling, faint but unmistakable, coming from the basement. She froze in bed, heart racing. Surely it was just her imagination. The next morning, she went down to check the basement, and to her horror, the clown doll was back, sitting right where she had found it. Emma was terrified. She knew she had thrown it away, but here it was again, as if it had never left. She called her husband, Mark, who dismissed her fears as overactive imagination. He picked up the doll and tossed it in the trash bin outside once more, but Emma couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something was watching her. Over the next few days, things only got worse. The doll reappeared in random places around the house, sitting on the couch, lying on the kitchen table, even propped up in the hallway. No matter how many times they threw it out, it always found its way back. Mark still refused to believe anything was wrong, but Emma knew better. The final straw came when their youngest daughter, Sarah, began talking about the funny clown who played with her at night. One evening, Sarah came downstairs, holding the clown doll by its hand. "He says he wants to stay," she whispered, her voice distant. Emma panicked. She had to get rid of the doll for good. She grabbed it, drove to the edge of town, and threw it into a dumpster at the local junkyard. But when she got home, there it was, sitting on the front porch, its glassy eyes staring at her. Desperate, Emma contacted a local priest, hoping to rid her house of the doll's presence. The priest agreed to bless the home. That night, as they prepared for the ritual, the giggling started again, soft at first, but gradually louder. The sound seemed to come from every corner of the basement, echoing through the walls. The priest began the blessing, but as soon as he started, the lights flickered. The temperature dropped sharply, and the basement grew dark. The priest continued, but the giggling only grew louder, more menacing. Suddenly, the doll's head turned toward them, and its painted smile twisted into something grotesque. "You can't stop me," it whispered. The lights went out completely. In the dark, Emma heard a crash, followed by Mark's scream. When the lights came back on, Mark was lying unconscious on the floor, and the clown doll was nowhere to be found. After that night, the family moved out of the house, leaving everything behind. They never spoke of the clown again, but Emma could still hear it sometimes, the faint sound of giggling just beyond the edge of her hearing. Neighbors claimed the house was haunted, and future residents never stayed long. The doll was never seen again, but the giggling never stopped. Thank you for watching these 5 terrifying clown horror stories. We hope they gave you chills and made you think twice about ever trusting a painted smile again. If you enjoyed these spine-tingling tales, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another scary story. And remember, clowns may seem funny, but some nightmares wear a smile. Sleep tight.